So I think we're going to get started. It's 12:01, and I don't want to make anybody wait. People will continue to join us as we move on. Welcome. My name is Dawn Monaco. I'm with the SPAN Parent Advocacy Network, and I'm also the co-director of the Reach for Transition, which is a grant that educates parents, families, youth and young adults with disabilities, as well as professionals on all aspects of transitioning from school into adult life. This is our supported decision-making series, part 3. So we held part 1 and 2 starting last fall, and part 1 was skills to build self-determination, and we talked about lots of skills that can be worked on at a young age through the life of a child and young adult with a disability. And then in part 2, we talked about incorporating goals into the IEP to help build self-determination and self-supported decision-making skills. So welcome, this is our part 3, and I just wanted to mention that if you missed part 1 and 2, we have them on our website, which we're going to show you as we move on. We'll give you the link to that site. And so they're there. We are actually recording this one as well, and they'll be available to you to go back to and watch as many times as you feel you need to. So this is part 3, and in part 3, we are discussing helping youth and young adults take charge of their health care. Because as you know, health care is a big part of a young adult's life, especially if they have a disability. So we want to work to help empower them in that area. So within this webinar, so for the whole part of the series 1, and there's going to be a 4th one as well, 1 through 4, we at SPAN and myself have been collaborating with the Maine Parent Federation, which is Maine's parent center. And within the Maine Parent Center, I have been collaborating with Carrie Woodcock, who is the executive director there in Maine, and also Dillon Campbell, who is the youth coordinator with the Maine Parent Federation. So we've collaborated for all 3 of these webinars, and we will also be collaborating for part 4. But for this particular part 3, because it was healthcare, we reached out to an organization called Family Voices, and there are 3 other people that we worked with for the development of this webinar. So Lauren Agaradas, she actually works with me at SPAN, and she is the state coordinator for Family Voices at SPAN. Then we have Lisa Maines, who is the project coordinator for the Leadership in Family and Professional Partnerships for Family Voices. And then also, you will not hear, Lisa will be actually speaking and presenting on this webinar, but we also collaborated with Melissa, who is a project director with Family Voices National. So Melissa and Lauren will not be presenting, but they were a big part of helping to put the content together along with Lisa on this webinar. So I want to actually now thank the 3 of them for working with us on this, because I think we have a great webinar here. So again, I wanted to make sure that you know that this is being recorded. And then also at the end, we'll have time at the end for a Q&A. And then we also will be sending you afterwards an evaluation, because it's really important that we hear from you and you let us know your thoughts regarding this webinar. And you'll also be asked if there's any other topics that you want some information on. So we're always looking for topics for future webinar series. So please, if you have a moment, we really do want to hear from you. So if you could complete that evaluation, we would really appreciate it. But let me just mention, before we move forward, I would like to invite Lisa Maines to just talk for a minute about Family Voices, because you may be saying, what is that? So Lisa, are you available? Are you unmuted?
I am. Thanks, Dawn. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. So yeah, hi everybody. Family Voices, a lot of you might be familiar with us, but just in case anybody isn't, Family Voices is a national family-led organization. We connect family organizations across the United States and the territories to each other. And a priority for Family Voices is to promote partnerships with families and youth at all levels of their health care. And one of our largest projects is the Leadership in Family and Professional Partnership, which gives us opportunities to provide some national leadership on engaging families and youth in healthcare decision-making. Often we do that by providing support to the state family-to-family health information centers.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And then there is, their emails are here. And I think we might have a website address at the end that you can go ahead and get some more information. So thank you, Lisa. Lisa's going to be joining us as we move forward into the webinar and be presenting along with us. So thank you. So what is supported decision making? And, you know, we usually start each webinar off with this because we want to reiterate really what supported decision making is, because it is a less restrictive option and alternative to guardianship. So some of you may have heard that word guardianship, and we want you to know that this is another option which is less restrictive. It's a way for people with disabilities to get support in making their own choices. The person with a disability is the ultimate decider. Trusted friends, family, and staff are chosen by that individual to serve as their supporter. And really, it's a fancy way of saying something that we all do every day, asking for help to make decisions. Because every person can make choices and has the right to make choices. Because we really want to assume competence. And I think that's important because often people with disabilities we assume that they are not able to do certain things. But we want to initially assume competence and work from there. So that's what supported decision making is. And then we also want to build self-determination. So what is that? People who are self-determined know what they want and how to get it. They advocate on their own behalf and are involved in solving problems and making decisions about their lives. So it's very similar to self-advocating, really. And what we want to do, and what we did talk a lot about in part 1 and 2, is how to build those self-advocacy skills. Because once you have self-advocacy skills, then you are self-determined. And once you are self-determined, you can make your own decisions. So I'd like to introduce Carrie Woodcock. She's going to be jumping in now, and she is the Executive Director of the Maine Parent Federation.
Thank you, Dawn. So a lot of times when we speak about transition, we think of it in terms of transitioning from children's services or school into adult life. But it's important to remember that transition to adult life is much more than just school to work. It's important for us to work on independent living skills, to make plans to do things that that individual wants to do, that individual needs to do. Make sure that they have independent living skills, which contributes to the independence not only in the workplace, but in the community, recreation, home, personal care, finances, and medical decisions. And medical decisions can be one of those really tough areas for families to allow the individual to have independence on, because there are oftentimes life or death decisions that involve medications and prescriptions and complex decision-making skills that family members and caregivers have a tough time of letting go. So it's important that when we talk about transition with young adults that we're including medical decisions in the conversation. These skills can be used and included within IEP transition goals. They can be included with Centers for Independent Living and in person-centered planning goals, which are oftentimes most used when obtaining state support services. So we've sort of divided this up into highlighting the different skills that can be obtained when looking at transitioning for medical care during the elementary years, middle school years, and high school years. So in this slide, we're highlighting the skills that can be used or worked on during elementary years, and it's working on the individual understanding their disability, understanding what it's called, how it may affect their life. Some examples are, you know, I have Down syndrome and I go to physical therapy, or I have ADD and ADHD and I take medications. And so it's important that we make sure that they understand their different disability and can speak to it and work on these skills at an early age and advocating for their needs. And, in schools, these type of goals can be included on transition plans. Having them take ownership of when their OT appointment is at school, understanding or setting an alarm on their desk and they get up and they walk to the OT appointment on their own. Those are simple tasks that can be done to support their self-advocacy and self-determination, and understand some of their medically complex needs for their disability.
Yeah, and Carrie, I just also want to mention here that this is something that a lot of parents may struggle with, talking to their child about their disability, and that can begin very, very early, even before, as early as 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. But it's important I just want to note here that it is important that when we talk to our child or our children about their disability, we begin empowering them and getting them to understand that there's nothing wrong with having an area that you need to work on. We all have strengths and we all have weaknesses, but that's okay. You might not be good in this area, or you may struggle with this, but you're really good in this area, and you flourish in this area. So I just wanted to mention that we've done a webinar on this. So again, you could check out the Reach for Transition webpage on SPAN on talking to your child about their disability. So I just wanted to note that it's something that can be done at a young age, and it's really important because as parents, I'm a parent, ultimately we want to protect our children, but when we shelter them and we don't talk about that, we're not protecting them. It's actually a hindrance.
In another area that's often forgotten about, we had a note to speak about too, as well, is it's important to note that oftentimes behaviors are highlighted in school settings, and the behaviors could be a result of something medical for these individuals. So it's important for that individual to be able to communicate their needs as to how they're feeling, and working with that individual when they're having a behavior, and helping the school and the family to identify that maybe that child is actually in pain and it's something going on. A lot of times it might be a medications that could be causing something as simple as constipation, which can be very, very painful for that individual and that child. And the only way they have to communicate is through a behavior. So identifying some of their medical needs and behaviors that may be associated with pain that they're experiencing because of their medical needs is an important aspect of working with school systems when behavior is becoming an issue, making sure that you're considering that there could be something medical. Dillon, can you go back to slide number 6? So it's 2 slides. I just wanted to sort of cover, I think I glazed over that slide by accident, but I wanted to cover starting with the most basic. So go up one more. Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to make sure that we were covering just different areas that you can work with the individual on when talking about advocating for their medical needs. So things like choosing their doctor, knowing when to visit the doctor for an illness, and knowing when to visit a doctor for a regular checkup, handling everyday illnesses or injuries that may not need a doctor's visit. For example, I have a headache. I just need to take some Advil or some aspirin or some Tylenol, and knowing how many to take, or I have a cut and I just need to put a Band-Aid on it. It's not something that I need to visit a doctor for, which takes us to the next point in taking over-the-counter medications versus prescribed medicine, and making sure that we're taking them correctly, and knowing when and whom to call for an emergency when you're or identifying when you're in an emergency, and knowing who to call for medical help. Thanks, Dillon. And then you can skip over that one and go to the next one.
So yeah, so I'm Dillon Campbell, and I'm the youth coordinator here at Maine Parent Federation. And one of the things that I do is I work a lot with youth in transition age around self-advocacy. And really, this is we talk a lot about self-advocacy in part 1 and 2, but really self-advocacy is just when an individual speaks up for themselves to get their needs and wants met. So it really involves making decisions about yourself while working towards the overall goals of communicating your needs independently. And during the middle school years, this is a great time for youth to plan one-on-one time with their medical provider. So something like checking in at the appointment desk can teach you that their voice matters, that this appointment is for them, and that it's important for them to be in the driver's seat. So allowing youth the ability to speak with a doctor about healthy living will emphasize the fact that this appointment is all about them. Also, during the middle school years, it's important for youth to work on taking medications with some help, and discuss with your youth that this will eventually be their responsibility. And one of the ways you can do that is through setting a timer, maybe on your phone, or setting a routine for a day-to-day routine. It's also important for youth at this age to understand the accommodations and modifications that will affect them, whether it's accessible doctor spaces, sign language, or an interpreter.
So recently, this is Carrie again, and I have a daughter with Down syndrome who is a 6th grader and will be 13 in a couple weeks. And recently, we made the decision for anxiety purposes to put my daughter on Zoloft. And so this is a great example of including her in a medical appointment and speaking to her at that appointment when it came time to relay the message and what we were talking about and considering to make her feel better. During certain parts of the appointment, with the psychiatrist, she sat in the room, and then during other parts, she would go out and play with some toys where we were discussing some of the side effects that might cause her more anxiety for her to hear. And then towards the end of the appointment, she was brought back into the room, and the psychiatrist sort of looked at her and just said, "So Sammy, what we're talking about today is a medication to help you feel better when you're afraid of something so that you don't get tummy aches." Sammy has accidents when she has high fear and anxieties, which causes her to have bowel incontinence. So she explained it to her in a way that was understandable to her level. And then she looked at Sammy and she said, "How do you feel about that?" And I was wondering if, everything was sort of getting through and she was understanding. And Sammy took this long, deep breath inside and the doctor said, "Is that something that you would like to do?" And she just looked at her right straight in the eye and said, "Yes." And you could feel the relief just roll off her shoulders. And I knew at that moment in time we had done the right thing in including her on the appointment. And she did understand that what we were trying to do was to help make her feel better. And now every morning at 6 o'clock, she asks for her medicine to be mixed with her orange juice, and she watches me do it, and she takes it on her own. So just by including her on that appointment, it's helped her to take some ownership of something that's new, and it's a new medical degree of her life. So it was the right thing to do, including her in on that appointment.
That's wonderful, Carrie. Also, let me just mention, Dillon, if we could just go back to that slide for one more second. The portion where it is check in at the appointment desk, my son is currently 21, but when he was closer to 18, we started talking to him and making sure he understood the names of his doctors and which doctor he went to for which medical issues. And as well as we role played on him going up to the appointment desk on his own and introducing himself to the nurse behind the desk and saying who he was there to see. So when we got to the office, I was able to sit down and he walked up and did it himself. And, this was his beginning to advocate for himself in the healthcare arena. Okay.
So here are just a few examples of what working towards medical independence might look like. So it might include using a smartphone or alarm watch to track your medication schedule. And it can even include recognizing your own symptoms of the condition and signs and whether you need to act. So it also may look like asking questions of the primary care provider and specialists.
So this is an area where I've shared with Dillon and Carrie that we actually utilize the phone with my son as well, who's on the autism spectrum. And he has many alarms set up on his phone for all different areas. He takes medication every day. So the alarm will go off in the morning while he's eating breakfast, and then it'll go off in the evening while he's eating dinner to remind him that he has to take his medication. And we actually use that smartphone for lots of different things. It's a great tool for him. He gets reminded when he needs to shower, when he needs to cut his nail. I mean, not shower, I'm sorry, shave, when he needs to cut his nails. And we actually use it also not only in the healthcare arena, but we use it for when he knows when he has to take the garbage out, what nights he has to do that. So, but the alarm has been worked wonderful for us, for him to become independent. The whole idea is for them to be able to do this on their own and be independent and not have to rely on us to remind them to take their medication. So the phone alarm has been really helpful in that area.
So during the high school years, this is where you should really start talking about transitioning to an adult doctor and what this might look like. So you should have conversations with your current doctor about what age the transition will have to happen. And you should identify important characteristics that the new doctor should have. Like, does the doctor have good disability experience? Not all doctors have the same experience working with all types of people. So you should find a doctor who fits your needs. Has the doctor worked with somebody with a similar disability as you? And you should also meet and choose with new potential doctors. It's important to meet with multiple doctors to find the one that's the best fit. You should weigh the pros and cons of each.
Dillon,
So in this
there's
area,
a question, or should we wait till after for questions?
I actually saw that, Rosalind. One, do we want to wait till after? Maybe, well, she's talking about medical appointments, so why don't we go ahead and mention this? I just have to open it up. How do I do that now? So
Okay,
she
it's
says,
under questions. Yeah, if you open that tab.
So Angela is saying that I have a daughter with a chronic illness, now transitioned, but having her check in for medical appointments was something we also did. It got her comfortable for when she was able to go to appointments on her own. That's wonderful, Angela. Thank you for sharing that. I agree. I think that, and again, I just want to mention that for us, we had to practice this. And so this actually leads into the next slide, Dillon, where we talk about goals and objectives. And so if you have a young adult with a chronic illness, you can work on that with school, because this is an important life skill to make them into a independent, productive young adult. So it can be incorporated into your IEP for goals and objectives. So these are other goals and objectives that we wanted to show you to give examples of. And as in all your goals and objectives in the IEP, whether it's academic or life skill based, we want to make sure that they are measurable, because if it's just a goal that's not measurable, it's just a statement. We want to be able to track progress, so we have to make it measurable. So we have here, John will learn self-catheterization so he can independently take care of his toileting needs while attending culinary school. So there's lots of different areas of examples. Monique will contact 2 adult care providers to interview during the first semester so she can choose a provider who will care for her before she turns 21. Yuri will learn to order and pay for his medicine so he can live independently in the community. Kesha will identify symptoms that need urgent and emergent care and will develop a plan for emergency care. And Patrick will call and get to know the people at the transportation agency so he can call when he has appointments to set up rides. So they're all different arenas of healthcare, and all equally important. So when I say that they need to be measurable, we need to take this goal and break it down into short areas. So maybe, with John, with his catheterization, obviously that may need a nurse involved, but we want to break that skill down and make sure that he's able to meet and master all those individual skills so that he can ultimately master this complete goal. So I think it's sometimes parents don't realize that these are types of goals that they can have in their transition plan. Because again, that transition plan has to meet all of your young adults' unique needs. And the goal is for them to be an independent, productive adult. And when we talk about supported decision making, we're not expecting these young adults to be able to do all these items by themselves. That's why they have support people in their lives. And if I missed anything, please, Carrie and Dillon, jump in.
I was just going to jump in and mention that these goals are not just for IEPs. It's also important to remember, if you're working with state services and you have in-home supports in your home and you have person-centered planning, you can include goals of this nature in those person-centered plans as well, so that you're sort of doubling up on the way that your child is receiving the information. So, you know, you're practicing the goals with them at home and when you go to appointments, but that you also have two sets of professionals who are also working on these goals with them, one in school and one with your in-home supports. I know for my children, both of them, receiving information from me isn't always well received, and sometimes receiving it from a third party and doubling up on that helps to get the message across.
Yes, excellent point. Thank you. So Lisa, are you unmuted?
I am unmuted.
Thank you.
I just wanted to, before I get into this slide, I wanted to go back for a moment to that process of searching for an adult provider Dillon was referring to earlier, and just encourage that it's important to be open-minded in doing that. Adult providers are often hard to find, and sometimes it's even harder when you, for example, seek a provider with a disability-specific experience. I know I have a son that's 22 now, and when we were searching for an adult provider, we actually ended up with a provider who has a lot of experience working with the elderly. So even though he didn't have experience, my son has a very rare diagnosis, and he didn't have that experience, he did have experience helping people coordinate care with a lot of different providers, and it was someone that my son really liked and he related to. So, you know, it might not have been when I started the search, it might not have been exactly what I thought I was going to get, but it's all worked out really well. So I think having an open mind is helpful. So now,
That's a great point.
So like an IEP, an individualized education plan, supported decision-making will also be individualized based on a person's strengths. But as Carrie was getting at earlier, it's important that each person, each youth, be encouraged and supported to understand themselves as much as possible. For example, what are their medical needs? Do they need technology to help them express their opinions and their needs? That technology might be critical for some to be able to explain any conditions they may have or accommodations that they might need. As with all of us, youth with special needs should learn to be aware of how they feel and what might not feel right. They should be able to work towards being able to express those feelings and asking for the support that they need from family, friends, and their doctors. It's always good to encourage youth to ask questions. I mean, all of us should ask questions. It's just so important to feel comfortable to be able to ask the things that you need to know. And the more we understand the systems that care for us, the better. Health insurance, Social Security, and learning to adopt some least restrictive options of supported decision-making, you know, will help generate a lot of those questions that they'll need to ask to be more familiar with the system that they're trying to navigate. Next slide. Thank you. So these 5 steps on this slide also represent an acronym of SHARE, the word share. Each letter represents a step in the process. Step 1 is S, which stands for seek. It's important to seek participation on your team. The team might include doctors, family, caregivers, or maybe it includes friends. Step 2 in the process would represent H, which stands for help. Make sure you and your team members work together to explore all choices that are available to you before you make a big decision. Step 3 is for A, which stands for assess. Here's where the team will make sure they understand the individual's preferences. What is most important to them? Step 4 is for R, which stands for reach. So now you have all the information you've gathered as a team, and you've made sure that you understand what the individual values. And now it's the time to put together those 2 things to reach some shared decisions. And finally, step 5 is for E, which stands for evaluate. Get the team back together and ask each other, especially that individual or the youth, how did our decisions work? Is the individual satisfied? So really important steps to go through the process.
This is Carrie, just to sort of piggyback on what Lisa was saying at the beginning of her presentation. Another concept that you want to make sure that you're speaking to the individual about, and also the provider's office, is that each provider has their own office guidelines as to when an individual will need to age out of that office into an adult provider. And so unlike transition out of public schools, where you age out based on your state, and all schools age out at the same time, each provider's office have different recommendations and different policies in place as to when an individual will need to transition to an adult healthcare provider. It's really important at an early age to understand with your provider when that process will happen, so you can start preparing for it before the child is set to transition. So, as you start the transition process at the age of 14 with schools, start asking those questions to your provider, because some may be 18, some may be 21, some may be 26. It'll vary based on your provider in the specific office. So making sure you have an understanding as to when your child will need to switch will really help with the preparation process of switching.
Yeah, that's a great point, Carrie. And this is Lisa again. Just to add to that confusion, sometimes specialists also have, so not just your primary care provider, but the specialists will also often have different ages. So
Yeah, this is Dawn. I agree. Like, I've already checked. My pediatrician goes till 26. He'll see my son, who's currently 21, till he's 26. But like you mentioned, Lisa, I mean, it's a process, and it could take a while to find someone. So yeah, knowing that age is really important, because you want to start maybe a couple several years before that point. So I'd like to open it up to some questions, if you'd like, if anyone has any right now, because the next few slides are really just some resources that we have for you. So please, if you have any questions regarding this, you could put them in the chat box or the questions box, whichever, it doesn't matter. We'll see them either way. So if you need an accommodation and you want us to unmute you, we could do that as well. Please ask away.
I think while we're waiting too, if this is Lisa, if I could just put out there that, sometimes as parents, I know I struggled with this, and I hope it wasn't just me, but I'm sure I want my son to be as independent as possible, but it took some self-reflection for me to really come to terms with what that meant, and for me to be able to let go of some things. So sometimes I think that's a challenge, and I do think that it takes some self-reflection to really get to a point where you're ready to fully support your child in achieving their maximum independent level.
Yeah, you are certainly not alone, Lisa, in that area. I mean, my son is only a year younger than yours, and I've said this in part 1 and 2, and I thank you for bringing it up, because it should be said in every part, that it's really, for me, it was difficult to move from parent to support person. And I just have to keep running the loop in my head that he needs to be an independent adult, and I need to switch from doing everything for him to supporting him to do them.
And I think if you refer back to our part 1 of the supported decision-making series, if you have not seen that, there are some good other least restrictive options that we provide to you that can work under a supported decision-making plan, that can work specifically within a medical world. So there are things such as powers of attorneys and direct healthcare initiatives, and even a limited guardianship for medical, if that's something that you feel like you need to explore, while still encouraging your child to be as independent as possible. So it's important to remember that any supported decision-making plan, like all of our children, are very individualized, and you need to explore all the options and have conversations about it as a family to see what will work best. And yes, medical is one of those more sensitive areas when we're doing trainings with families that we run into, where parents have a really, really difficult time letting go, with good reason. But it's important that before the child hits the age of majority, you start exploring some of the options and doing some trials with them so that you have a plan in place when the transition occurs.
Yeah, and we've provided resources all along, but if you have a problem accessing any of the webinars and the resources that are on them, I just posted my email address. Certainly reach out to me and I can try to provide you whatever you might need with regard to this area. So I'm not seeing any questions, although somebody did mention they had a hard time getting on. Yes, this is being recorded and it'll be available on our website. So no worries, you'll still be able to listen to it. Let's see. You're welcome, Linda. So I'll move on. Because I don't see any questions, but continue to put them in if you do have any. So this is a resource that we have up on our website, which is, we call it our Health Advocacy Across the Lifespan. So this is available on the span and there's the link for you. It's a great resource. We have another document, which if you can move ahead, Dillon, that I use all the time in my transition workshops. We do some workshops for young adults, and I use this with them as well. There's lots of activities within this document, and they're very easy to use, and I highly recommend it if you can go on to that. This is from the Boggs Center, which is New Jersey's University of Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. University Center. Every state has one, but that's ours in New Jersey. So it's a great resource. This is the link to the recordings. All of the recordings are on this link, but we're showing you here part 1 and part 2. The link that are on those flyers is when you were registering it to attend them, but the link to the recordings is right there. You will find many other webinars aside from this series on that web page. So please check it out. There's lots of great resources. And
this is Lisa. I just wanted to let you know that Jeanette has a really nice suggestion in the chat box.
Oh, let's see. Oh, I don't see it. Where is that?
Under questions, not the chat box. Look under questions.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes.
That's okay. Oh, Dawn, I joined late, but I did want to mention the shared plan of care, which can be accessed through the Department of Health's website. Yes, it's a great tool for young adults navigating healthcare. Thank you, Jeanette. Yes, that is a great tool. I've seen it and it's really it's easy to utilize. It is a great tool. So do you have the actual link, Jeanette, that you could share in the chat box, or so where to access it? If you have that link, if you could put that in there, that would be great. Thank you. And this is our, if you're interested in part 4, this will complete our series. This is supported decision making, a legal alternative to guardianship. So just very quickly, a lot of times parents and family members are told once a child turns 18 that they have to seek guardianship of that child. We want parents to understand that there is an alternative to guardianship, which is supported decision making. So this is being facilitated by the executive director of the executive co-director of SPAN, Diana Otan, will be presenting this and reviewing what that actually means and how you go about that legally, how that works. So please, if you can join part 4, that would be wonderful. It will be recorded and put it on our website, and that will complete our supported decision-making series. I think, do we have, okay, let me go on. The next one is some resources that we have. This is a wonderful website, Got Transition. There's lots of information on that website. So if you're looking, for transition information, I want to get on a plane, Dillon. If you're looking for transition information, more, check out that website. They have great tools on there. There's the Centers for Independent Living, the CILs. There's several in each state. This is their website, and lots of information on that site. Family Voices site, which I promised we would provide for you. This is their website, their link to their organization. Parent Training and Information Hub, parentcenterhub.org. Please, there's lots of resources for parent centers and for families on that website. There's a parent center in every state. So if you know someone who is living in a different state and they need help, you can find a parent center on that website. Your healthcare passport is another downloadable document that you can get on the SPAN website. And then we have our Reach for Transition website there, which has lots of resources for you. So please check that out. Here's our links, and I personally want to thank everyone for collaborating with us on this. It was a pleasure to work with Family Voices. I'm glad that it was mentioned to me to reach out to them since they have lots of great information on healthcare. So I want to say that I thank Lisa, Melissa, and Lauren for helping us out with this webinar. It was great, and I'm hoping that everyone else thinks it's as wonderful as I do. Any comments or questions from anyone? Yeah, here's all of our emails. So please, if you need anything, reach out to us. We're here. I can get you anything you need around this topic if you can't access any of the resources that we've provided. Or if you just have a question, I'm on my email constantly, so email me. I'd be more than happy to help you out. So I don't see any questions from anyone, and I think everyone's good. So I just want to remind everyone that you will be receiving an evaluation via, I guess, email, right, Rosalind? It'll go through the email that you registered
Yes.
with. And so
Mhm.
please, we really do value your opinion. So complete that evaluation. Let us know what you thought. Give some comments. There's area for you to comment on future webinars or just, information that you might need. And I will, look through every one of them. So please do so. We really, like I said, we value your opinion. So, and so I want to thank Dillon and Carrie and Lisa and Melissa and Lauren for contributing to part 3, and part 4 will be coming April 2nd. So if there is nothing else, this concludes our webinar. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.